ahead and get started. Okay, let's get started so we can be done. Okay. So this is the last lecture in this room. If you are a 1 credit hour student and you've been to all 5, you are done with lectures. You have no more lecture requirement. So somebody asked what should they do at 4:30 on Monday? So you can do whatever you want. You can work on your project. You can go for a run. You can eat. You can sleep. Huh? You can take a nap. Absolutely. You can meet with your team if you want. So you are done. If you are a 2 credit hour student, we have additional lectures that you can participate in to get to your 10 credits. We have all of the skill sessions that you're still all welcome to participate in. So if you can do more than 5 if your project requires it. I would not recommend that you invest. That shouldn't be your focus, is how many lecture credits can I get. If you need lecture credits, if you need specific skills for your project and you want to do a skill session for that, go ahead and do that. Or if there's skills that you want to add to your resume, you're welcome to participate in skill sessions. Just a reminder, if you're signed up for a skill session, please show up. If there's a reason why you can't attend, you should unregister as soon as possible. At least allow 24 hours. Because we've had a lot of skill sessions that were full, and then there were no-shows, and there were people who wanted to go to the skill session. So you're taking a spot from one of your EPICS teammates or peers, okay? So just a reminder for that. There were a number of suggestions on how to get ready for the design review. And so I encourage you to look at that, talk to returning members on your team on what you should do to prepare for design review. There is another lecture, the one that's going on simultaneously, giving effective design review presentations. It will be posted by Wednesday if you want to take a look at that, if there's hints on that. The strategy, so what you're trying to do in your design review is present your design in a way to elicit effective feedback. If there's a problem with your design, you want to find out sooner than later what's wrong with that. It's also a great way for you to think about, why did we do what we did? And you can start with your specifications, talk about all the stakeholders, and why you made the design decisions that you did for that to be able to get feedback. You're also going to want to talk about what is left, like what your plans are for the rest of the semester. So they'll be evaluating what you've done so far, but also your plan for the rest of the semester for that. For anybody who might be interested, if you have a leadership role, or especially if you're maybe one of those students that needs more lecture credits, we do a leadership workshop, a series of 4 interactive sessions. There is some outside work, so you can end up actually getting 8 credits for doing that. If this is something that you want to do because you want to develop those skills, you're more than welcome to participate. But do sign up by October 5th so that we have materials. It'll actually be October 19th and the 3 Mondays after that at 4:30. Okay? But that information's all in my EPICS. Also, if you need more lectures, after we get done with the leadership workshop, there'll be 3 more lectures, kind of part of the professional development series that are available. They'll be in B071, kind of mid-November to kind of near the end of the semester. So plan appropriately. It's better you choose things you're really interested in if you need extra lectures versus scrambling to find whatever's available and offered at the end of the semester when you find you're short. Okay? Any questions? So if you come here next Monday, you can have a nice little chat with whoever else is here. No, but we won't be having lecture, okay? So we're done meeting in this room, okay? Any questions? Yes?
Are there any programming skill sessions?
There are programming skill sessions. There are. So take a look. I don't know if we've done most of them already. We've already done 3. But we can connect you to TAs who can help with that. But yeah, there are some programming ones, yeah.
It says leadership has 8 credits. Doesn't mean it counts as 8. So
you have to go to 4 sessions, but you have to do homework outside. So we read a book and you do reflections, so it counts as 8. But you only have to go to 4 sessions. So, all right. Any other questions? Okay. So ethics. So the goals for today, understand everyday ethics in design. So we're going to talk about a couple of different aspects or ways of thinking about ethics, but as it relates to your projects and your role as professionals. Going to talk about a framework that you can use for making ethical decisions, and also talk about people first language. So if somebody's watching the video and have not done the ethics survey, please stop and complete that and then come back to this. So, and the link is on SharePoint. So hopefully all of you have done that. We can take a look. So if you talk to, often like ethics and morality, those words are often used interchangeably. But if you talk to philosophers, ethics really talks about more of the way that we think about, like how we think about what's right and wrong, where morality is defined as more of the ways of acting. So it has to do more with acting. Although similar to this, we often will think about ethics as, or at least morality as more personal. And another way of talking about ethics versus morality kind of comes out in this definition that kind of aligns with how people tend to think about it. Where morality are those standards that are applied to everybody. And these standards would be ideally how you would expect everyone to act, even if you had to follow that. Okay, so it is more of that general behavior, general situation in which we'll talk more about morality. Where we're going to differentiate and really spend most of our time is talking about ethics, where ethics are those special moral permissible standards of conduct that ideally every member of a profession wants every other member to follow, even if it means having to do the same. So this starts to be, when we talk about ethics, we're talking about a particular responsibility because you're part of a profession. And what it all entails with that. So some of you might be familiar with codes of conduct. Those are some ways in which we can talk about what is expected of us as a professional. Who are familiar with your discipline's professional code of conduct? Ever seen them? Okay, just a few. But actually almost every discipline, every profession, medical, legal, engineering, audiology, psychology, they all have professional codes of conduct, okay, for professions. The other way that we mean about what are your professional responsibilities gets at this next part. Also acceptable practices in the profession. So part of your ethical responsibility is to know what's appropriate for your discipline. And that's something that you're gaining through your disciplinary courses. So it does have to do with factors of safety. What's appropriate? What are appropriate ways to do testing? What are some other things that it might? Reliability. All of those things go into it. So it's not just, did I just follow a code of conduct, but do I know what's appropriate for my profession or for my discipline? Okay, as far as what are the ways of practice, the standard ways of practice. So we have a little bit of a challenge here though, right? I mean, how many have actually already graduated with their degree, right? Not yet? So what is your responsibility in this situation if you may not yet know what that is? Can you just decide on your own what's appropriate? I'm just going to make up factor of safety because, I'm an electrical engineer. We don't really do factors of safety that much. I don't know what's appropriate. What should I do in that situation? What is your responsibility? Because we're kind of in this fine line. You're learning to become professionals. You're acting in a professional role and designing a real project for someone. But yet, you're not quite there. So what do you do? Do you just decide? No. Look it up. Ask somebody. That's another reason we do design reviews. Because if we're not sure of what it should be, then we can ask somebody what it should be. Okay? So that's the one thing here as we talk about professional ethics, and it's actually in one of the codes, that we're kind of balancing that line. So one of this is to, if you don't know what it's acceptable practice with it on your project, you need to ask and go to people who are aware of what that should be. Okay. So talking about codes, so as I talked about before, professional ethics encompasses those codes or the ways, kind of the body of philosophy. So there are codes that guide behaviors, but there's even more, the standard practice. So codes, individuals can have codes of ethics. Have any of you had teams that have come up with kind of codes of practice or standard ways of practice? No? Sometimes you can do that. EPICS teams have done that in the past, where they've met and said, this is how we expect that everybody in our team is going to act. And if they don't act that way, then these are the consequences. So establishing those common ways of interacting, so you can do that. Professional societies all have codes of ethics that guide the behavior, that have been formed by their members in establishing and describing what's common for that. And most companies have codes. You can look at their mission, and they also have codes about ways that they think that they want their employees to act. And so it's important to be aware of all of the different codes that you might be operating under in your work here and when you're out in industry or other places working. So as I said, here's a link to a bunch of different codes. All professional societies have them. And if we take a look at the professional engineering one, this is similar. Many of the engineering codes of ethics are pretty similar. But one of the things that it describes is to hold paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public. Only provide services in their areas of competence. Public statements that are objective and truthful. Okay? So these are some of the codes that are available. One of the questions, though, if you look at this and you think maybe about a situation that you're, so the issue of maybe not having the knowledge in a specific area yet. Is there a code that would actually speak to that? Right, area of competence, right? So it starts to get at some of the things. It says to hold paramount the safety. But if you're thinking about how do I apply this to my project? There's a little bit of a challenge there, right? You're supposed to hold it paramount, but what does that mean? So one of the challenges with codes, even though it's important that we don't have conflict of interest and some of those other things, the codes don't always address the specific thing that you need to do. How do you decide what's safe enough? Or sometimes it doesn't address emerging technology that you may be working on. So this is really an area a lot for, especially like biomedical, where technology is evolving. But actually all of us are being exposed to technology, privacy issues, things that are going on that weren't issues before. So the codes tend to react to things that are happening with development and in society. But we need ways to be able to think about these things, about the work that we're doing specifically, and also about areas that are emerging for this. We also have the situation, sometimes we have competing goods or values. And how do you make a decision with some of those, or some of those dilemmas? So I asked this before. How do you determine, is it possible to make something 100% safe? And how do you determine if something is safe enough? Answer the first question. Is it possible to make something 100% safe? No. Not, I don't think ever. Okay? But how do you determine what's safe enough? What are some of the factors that should go in to determining if something's safe enough?
Age of intended audience.
Okay, the intended audience. So who are you, who's perceiving, right, whether or not the risk? And are they able to assess what is their expectation for the risk associated with that? So there are certain things we take a lot for granted and don't assume a lot of risk when we're doing that. We expect our food to be safe. But if we jump out of an airplane, we probably are assuming a little bit more risk with that, right? So there are some things that we need to do that. So it needs to be who is informed, who is part of this conversation, and what is their understanding of what is safe, and how informed are they of those different decisions. So one way to help think about this specifically for your projects is we have guidelines for doing ethical decision making. So there's actually a process here that looks a lot like design, and where we come with an ethical problem statement and we do an analysis of that and be able to identify the stakeholders, because different stakeholders may have different perceptions of risk or the ethical consequences of whatever decision we have to make with that. So we want to understand that. The values that are relevant and any relevant facts associated with the ethical decisions. Sometimes there are facts that actually help us make these, often there's facts that help us make these decisions related to that. Generate options for action. Sounds like kind of conceptual design. So what are ways that we could actually address the situation? And then using, looking at those different options, using different ethical frameworks, we can evaluate them and then reflect to see, kind of have that iterative process where it can inform our future decisions. So this is a model that was in one of this book. But one of the things that really happens for us is we're not really talking about hypotheticals. We have real life ethical or situations that do present ethical decision making. The scenarios that you looked at as part of the ethical survey, all of those come from real life things that have happened in EPICS. So there have been situations that have we've had to deal with some of those ethical situations or to look at that. And so then the other thing that's important is not to just determine, but actually have the moral courage to follow through and do the right thing, okay? So we have this moral or ethical decision-making process, but it's also embedded in this real life situation in which we need to follow through. So, the different ways that we can evaluate the options is by using a number of different ethical frameworks that if you were to study philosophy, that you would look familiar to you, like utilitarian approach. So what option will produce the most good and do the least amount of harm? That's often a framework that's used in making some of these decisions. But you would also consider rights or justice. If you might bring in an ethic of care, what option is best for the most in need in evaluating, or even the virtue. What option leads me to demonstrate honesty or some other virtue with that? So we can use those. So let's go to this scenario. Hopefully it looks familiar. So the student design team designing a new car. It's for people with physical and cognitive disabilities. And you're going to race down the hill. You've added spring tension to, I'll just read it from here, just some of it, to simulate the experience of driving. And they're not able to control the car. Before the first test run, a 14-year-old child on board, you hear the child's parent tell the child to be careful and to drive safely. And it turns to you and explains that they want you to lie, to say that they actually have control of the car. So you feel like that might take advantage of this child's disability and creates a possibility that the child would feel responsible. So would you lie to the child? How many say yes? Okay. How many say no? Okay. How many can't decide? Okay. So some of you who said yeah, what are the ethical issues? And why did you decide yes, no, or can't decide? What are the ethical issues here? Yes? So this situation in particular?
Already, so that they wouldn't be in charge of it, they would be in control of the car already. And then the parent tells you, tell them not in control. But were you going to tell them that in the first place? I feel like it's not. What's the point of making the car in the first place if they can't control it if you weren't going to allow them?
Well, I mean, part of the benefit, how many people are on the car team? Okay. So, I mean, the way it actually happened in real life was a little different than how this was, where the team was designing it, brought in the parent and the child to get feedback, and the mom told the team that they wanted their child to believe that they were driving, even if that was not the case. So the actual situation was slightly different to do that, where they said, you need to lie. So they've kind of forced that situation around just a little bit than how this is written. So that's actually what kind of caused this. So then the team was faced with this thing: do we go along with this lie, or do we kind of explicitly let the child know that they would not have control of the car? So that's the way it actually happened in there. But still, even in that case, what are the ethical issues? So I agree there could have been a scenario, and we're even going to talk about the car team knows that there's actually a design solution that can address this, right? There are ways as designers that you can mitigate or actually offset some of the ethical things, and that's why it's important to be considering these things early on. But in this situation, if you were put in that, or what are those ethical considerations? Yes?
Is it right or wrong to lie?
Is it right or wrong to lie? Right. So one of those things, one of the ethical considerations or issues is that you're balancing that. What's the other one?
Well, I was thinking it's who are you doing this for? You're doing this for the parent of the child. So you have to know your audience past that, because if you're really building this car for the child to have this experience, then why are you letting what would be considered a third party dictate how you design it for the child?
Okay. So you're doing this for the child or the parent. What's the other issue? Yeah.
Well, since the child's a minor, like, shouldn't their parents be the one to legally and just in all technical
Okay.
purposes?
Right. So what? So since a child's a minor, and or presumably parents know best for their children. I know I've made decisions for my children, especially when they were little, and for my son who has a disability, I have to make decisions for him. So these are the competing ethical issues. You don't necessarily want to lie, or is it right or wrong to lie in this situation, but don't we want to respect the parent-child relationship? And so this is what you're kind of struggling with in this situation. So those of you who said yes, why did you say yes? Why would you lie? Yes?
You may not know the consequences of saying no to the child. Like, you may not know what would happen if you actually told the child that you aren't going to actually do anything.
Okay, so in this situation, you're giving preference to the parent-child relationship, right? Because you don't know, and you're trusting the parent's judgment in this to be able to determine. Yes?
Do you have to lie straight to their face? Could you, like, lie to them by not telling them that they are in control? Just let them have fun without telling them directly that they have control of the car?
Right, so there's actually lots of different options that you could have that aren't posed in this situation, right? So not necessarily kind of leave it in ambiguous so you don't lie to them. What are some other things you could do? What did the team end up doing? Somebody from CAR. Yes?
We created an override mechanism system, so the child does have control of the car, but the safety driver is able to take over control if necessary.
Right. So there actually are many other options for how you can operate in there. So the design strategy here was to do the override mechanism. So the child does have control to a point, but then the professional driver has the ability to override if it becomes unsafe. And if you've been to one of the races, you could see that there were kids who needed somebody to be able to override to keep everybody safe. Themselves safe, the professional drivers, and actually the kids. There were some kids, when my son participated in this, on purpose were trying to crash it. I mean, kids are kids. And so there are a need to be able to do that. All right? Who said can't decide? Do you still can't decide? Who was it can't decide? Why can't you decide? Were you looking for that alternate way of dealing with this? Okay, so let's go through I want you to spend a few minutes. So the handout you had, I want you to walk through this, practice